Sub-Saharan Africa is divided from North Africa by the Sahara Desert, with the bulk of its land falling below the equator. The area contains 46 of Africa's 54 total countries. Although it is the second largest landmass of all major world regions at 8.7 million miles, it is the most rural, with 67% of its 920 million people living in rural areas. Despite development being hindered by droughts, lack of education, and public health, Sub-Saharan Africa contains 11 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world, with over 40 cities that contain at least 1 million people. Africa's middle class is growing, most notably in Nigeria, who emerged as a major producer and exporter of oil. Even with an increase in the workforce and a no-strings trade deal with China, there are still conflicts holding the economy back, such as the subsidies placed on the cash crops exports like coffee, cacao, cotton, peanuts, and palm oil to Europe and America, making it harder for African goods to compete in the world market. Sub-Saharan Africa's population is in a massive youth bulge, the median age being 20, since the population has increased by 2.6% a year. Part of the population bulge can be attributed to opposition to family planning, urbanization, and advances in healthcare. There is concern that as the population grows, there may be a gap between growth and resource output, since 1 in 5 Africans already lack access to healthcare, food, and clean water. There has been traction for more stable governance, but the people still face conflict based on ethnicity, religion, and the maldistribution of income. Although apartheid, or a body of laws enforcing segregation, was officially ended in 1994 with the election of Nelson Mandela in South Africa, the vestige of colonialism has an effect on the growth of some areas. Sub-Saharan Africa is considered the cradle of humanity and is one of the most diverse world regions, both ethnically and in biodiversity. There are 4 major family languages in the region: Niger-Congo, Khoisan, Afro-Asiatic, and Malagasy. Major religions include Christianity, Islam, and a number of indigenous beliefs. There has been a push as Africa urbanizes to make biodiversity a focal point, since places like Madagascar are under threat from vegetation clearing, an estimated 90% of the island already. Early farmers of these lands were responsible for the domestication and selective breeding that produced crops like millet, sorghum, yams, cowpeas, okra, watermelons, coffee, and cotton. The tyranny of distance. This is a term first coined by Geoffrey Bellaney in reference to Australia but applied to New Zealand and Africa as well. It refers to the effect of geographical remoteness on Africa's market opportunities as a result of poor transportation. It contributes to the poor economic growth rates many countries in Sub-Saharan Africa have experienced. Proxy wars. These were wars carried out by the people living in certain areas but instigated by other major powers. Both Russia and the United States have long been involved in supplying weapons and support to certain groups in Sub-Saharan Africa and pitting them against each other for the purpose of taking advantage of their natural resources. Al-Shabaab. This meant the young ones. This was an Islamist terrorist group that emerged after 1991 in the dysfunctional country of Somalia. They took advantage of a crumbling government and took over with the goal of forcing out Ethiopians, enforcing jihad on the state, and establishing ties to Al-Qaeda. Boko Haram. This translates to Western civilization is forbidden. It is a Salafist Islamic group in Nigeria responsible for many terrorist acts, most famously for the kidnapping of 200 Christian schoolgirls who were forced to convert to Islam, raped, and then married off to Boko Haram militants. New Partnership for Africa's Development, or also known as NEPAD. This was an agency formed by the African Union meant to improve conditions and corruption in Africa. Established in 2001, the main goal was to reduce poverty. However, it also aims to empower women and to promote democracy and good governance. Kanju. This is a term suggesting that the best solutions in dealing with Africa's problems should be dealt with locally, as opposed to the interference of bureaucratic institutions of the UN or Western powers. For Africa, obtaining a high score on the Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as CPI, is quite elusive. With 49 total countries, only 8 score higher than a 43, with Seychelles' leading score of 66. After 6 years straight, Somalia continues to be at the bottom of the index with a score of 10. Some Sub-Saharan Africa regions adopted democratic principles of government, while others are still governed by authoritarian leaders. Seychelles and Botswana have a well-functioning democratic system that gives them a high CPI. However, most of the region democratic systems are at risk. Côte d'Ivoire and Senegal pushed back against corruption. These were achieved thanks to the policy and institutional reform undertaken as well as political will in the fight. Burundi, Congo, Mozambique, Liberia, and Ghana are at the highest corruption. Abduction and attacks against journalists creates a culture of fear. The poorly way to handle corruption in these countries by a weak rule of law creates the high risk of corruption. Nigeria's CPI remains the same, even when the administration took several positive steps like establishing a Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, anti-corruption legal and policy framework on a national anti-corruption strategy. Kenya and South Africa social media has played a big role in helping citizens engage against corruption. The rise of technology has created access to live information. In addition, Kenya and South Africa government officials are using social media to engage with the people. Sub-Saharan Africa is the world's last developed region. The UN has made several attempts to improve poverty, health, education, the environment, and economic stability. Unfortunately, most of their efforts have received negative reviews and have made little progress. There is a controversy over whether Africa's problems should be dealt with internationally or whether Africans should be left alone to handle their issues locally, often referred to as Kanju. Should the UN take action in fixing Africa's problems, or should they take a step back and leave Africa alone? If the UN does have a responsibility to Africa, what can they do to improve conditions? Sub-Saharan Africa faces many issues that hinder growth as the population booms. In your opinion, what are the biggest obstacles facing industrialization in the region?